It's the 4th of July. It's Independence Day. So, in the spirit of independent thought, let's have 5 thoughts on Pitt's recruiting class, courtesy of me, here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's Independence Day. It's 4th of July. Happy Independence Day. Don't know if anyone will actually watch this video. Is this what you're doing on your 4th of July, your day off, your rare midweek holiday? You're watching Pitt videos and listening to Pitt podcasts? I hope so. I mean, it's only like 20 minutes of your day. I mean, it's the least you could do is check this out. But I appreciate you tuning in. It is the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com. Where's the dash? Nope, that side. There it is. See it? That's the dash. Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, however you prefer to refer to that. However you prefer to refer to that little marking. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with other Pitt fans. All day, every day. Panther-Lair.com. Pitt fans are talking about Pitt sports, and you want to be part of that too. So go check it out at Panther-Lair.com. And of course, our YouTube channel here, what we always ask you to do, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's where we put all of our exclusive Pitt video content. You're never going to find these morning Pitt videos anywhere else, I mean, other than our podcast channel. And so you want to subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of it. Click that the like button. It's down around there. The subscribe button, it's right down there. You click those things and you will never miss any of our Pitt video content here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know, so like I say, it's the 4th of July. It's Independence Day. So think about what should we talk about here? And, well, started thinking about independent thoughts. And, well, how about recruiting thoughts? How about 5 thoughts? How about 5 thoughts on the state of Pitt's 2024 recruiting class as it stands right now? And there's been, there's been a few things that have happened over the last a few days. Pitt got a commitment on Friday. Pitt missed on a commitment on Friday. Pitt missed on a commitment last night with a couple of 4-star defensive ends, one on Friday, one yesterday, committing to other schools. And so figure we should kind of update the class and where it stands and give you 5 thoughts on it. Of course, the class has 20 announced commitments. We believe there are still 2 unannounced commitments out there, keeping an eye on those at all times, seeing if anyone's going to step up and claim them. But 20 announced commitments right now as of Monday night. Recruiting class is ranked number 17 in the nation. It's a pretty good spot to be as you head into July. And we all know things will shift and move. We'll talk about that in a little bit. 5 thoughts. Number 1, and I'll kind of pick up where I left off yesterday because I keep thinking about this. I really like this offensive line class. I talked about this a lot yesterday in the aftermath of Maurice Schmorenzer committing to Pitt. We talked about the offensive line class, how they were up to 5 linemen so far, which would, if they end up signing 5, that'll be the biggest offensive line class Pitt has signed in 7 years. Going back to 2017 when they signed Carter Warren and Owen Drexel and Carson Van Lin and Gabe Hoy and Jerry Drake. They signed 5 offensive linemen that year. They haven't had that big of a recruiting class since. But now with an opportunity, since they have a lot of scholarships available in this class, they're trying to load up on the linemen. And they've got 5 committed. And I think these are some good prospects. I really do. The more I look at this class, the more I look at this group of offensive linemen, I think it is a step forward. And they've gotten good offensive line prospects over the years. It's not like they haven't gotten anyone good. I mean, they had an ACC championship winning, team that was powered, in large part by the offensive line, certainly by the play of the quarterback, but he needs that offensive line to play well. That ended up being the highest scoring offense in Pitt history. That's some credit to the offensive line. Obviously, last year, Maurice Schmorenzer said it himself. He said they had a running back who broke a bunch of records. Well, you don't do that without a good offensive line. And so they've recruited well here and there, a guy or 2 each year. But I think this might be their best overall class, total class, of offensive linemen. It's led by Caleb Holmes, the guard from Georgia, who I've said I think is a 4-star prospect and should be one, even if he's not rated as such. You have the 2 in-state guys, Giovanni Cooley and Adham Abaraya. Abaraya potentially could play tackle or guard, probably guard. Cooley will be a tackle. Mason Lindsay, who can be a tackle out there on the end from DeMatha. Schmorenzer, who could play any of the 5 positions. I think it's a good group. I really do. And the more I kind of reflect on this offensive line class, I think it's one of the better ones that Pitt has put together. Now, as we're going to say with all of these things, and the eternal caveat, the permanent caveat that's always going to get brought up, is whether or not they can hold on to these guys. Of whether, and this isn't just about offensive linemen, it's about the whole class. Because we've seen, year after year, particularly since the June official visits started, that there are decommits. And there's already been one this year, with Jason Johnson. Maybe two if you want to count Coy Beasley as well, having committed, not announced it, and then ending up committing to Purdue. So you're always going to run that risk, and I think that potentially could lead them to taking a sixth offensive line commit in this class, just to hedge against possibly losing somebody. Not that there's anyone specific in mind, but just, the possibility of it. I think it's, if they can still end up with 5 and it's mostly made up of this group and it still has Caleb Holmes in it, I think he's key to this being a good offensive line class. If Caleb Holmes is still in it, then I think it'll be a really good O-line class. I really do. Thought number 2. And again, this is something we've talked about before. There's only so many things we can say about the recruiting and recruiting classes when we talk about it every day, but I think it's important to reiterate again. Still need a quarterback. There's not a lot of holes left, and we'll talk about needs and wants in a few minutes, later in this episode. But the quarterback is it's the only position that hasn't been addressed, unless you want to talk about specialists. It's the only position that hasn't been addressed so far. And they need one. And we've seen a number of, we've seen a bunch of targets on the board. We've seen 5 quarterback targets at one point. That list whittled down of those original 5 down to just 1. And, in Trevor Jackson, who we've talked about, the quarterback from Florida, really the last man standing from that group of 5. But then we also talked about how 2 weeks ago, Julian Duggar from Penn Hills really kind of emerged back on the scene as a legitimate candidate for Pitt. And this has been the topic of a lot of conversation on the message boards, particularly yesterday. And I was involved in a lot of the conversation as well. And there's a feeling that Pitt is doubling back on Julian Duggar because they feel like they're going to miss out on Trevor Jackson. That this is scraping the bottom of the barrel, and the class will be a whiff again. Just like signing Ty Diefenbach if they end up with Julian Duggar. I don't think that's the case. And I think there's a few things I would say about the Duggar situation. One, I don't think it necessarily reflects on how the staff feels about Trevor Jackson. I think if the staff felt like they were losing Trevor Jackson, they would put a full court press on Julian Duggar. And they're not doing that. They've restarted the communication. They're in contact with him a lot. They obviously liked what they saw a lot, but it's not like they're hammering him for a commitment. They're not pushing to try and get a commitment right now, because I don't think they necessarily feel that pressure just yet. And the other point is, if Pitt ends up with Julian Duggar in the class, I don't necessarily... Well, let me say this a different way. I believe that Frank Signetti and the Pitt coaches are content to go without signing a quarterback in this class. I don't think they view it as a necessity. I think if they end up signing the class in December or February and there's no quarterback, they'll say, okay, it's okay. They got Diefenbach, they got Christian Bear for a few years, maybe they got Nate Yarnell for a few more years. The transfer portal's always out there. They're okay with it. I think they're okay with not signing a quarterback in this class. So if they do end up signing Julian Duggar, I think that's indicative of what they think of him, that they really are convinced about him as a player. And I don't say this to convince you. I think you can watch Julian Duggar's tape and say, wait, this guy looks pretty good. This guy, he's a big, athletic guy who can throw the ball well, can move around. But keep that in mind, that they're willing to not sign anyone. So if they do sign someone, it's probably someone they believe in and they're convinced about. And I think that's the case with Julian Duggar, if that's who ends up being their quarterback in the class. So that's going to be an interesting situation to watch and monitor. I'm actually looking forward to it. Next Sunday, I'm going to hopefully get a chance to see Julian Duggar in person at the 210s camp. Local top 150 prospect camp that's going to be going on next Sunday, and I'm excited to see him. I haven't seen him since, I forgot if he was even at the camp last year, but it'll be good to see him in action again, see him throwing and moving around. So that's thought number 2. Thought number 3 is there have been some misses. There have been some misses in the class, and there's no way to sugarcoat that. There's no way to rationalize it. It's the reality of the situation. You look at the official visitors they brought in. Reggie Powers, the outside linebacker, came on the first visit weekend, committed to Michigan State. Dwan Riggs, running back, came on the first visit weekend, committed to Oregon. Jaden LaFontaine, offensive lineman, came on the first visit weekend, committed to Kentucky. Gabe Williams, a four-star outside linebacker, came on the first visit weekend, committed to Virginia Tech. Dominic Kirks, four-star defensive end. This was on Friday night, committed to Washington. Elias Rudolph, four-star defensive end, again on the first visit weekend, committed to Michigan last night. The list goes on and on. Chasen Johnson flipped from Pitt to UCF. Central Florida getting that flip out of Pitt. Coy Beasley, who seemed to be a lock for Pitt, or as much of a lock as possible, seemed to have committed to Pitt, ends up announcing for Purdue last week, a four-star safety prospect. Cameron Clark, the outside linebacker that Pitt had on campus, he committed to Ole Miss. To Ryan Nichols, committed to Kentucky yesterday. Another four-star guy, a four-star DB who visited during the second official visit weekend. DJ McCormick, the outside linebacker, committed to Central. Oh, he was committed to Central Florida before he visited Pitt, and he ended up staying committed to Central Florida. Sayer Torrance, a wide receiver who visited Pitt, committed to Michigan State shortly after his official visit. Now, Pitt obviously got a lot of commitments. They have 20 commitments right now. 9 of those have been in the month of June from guys who have come on official visits. So it's not like they've entirely struck out, but some guys have gotten away. And unfortunately, when you're looking at it from our perspective, unfortunately, some of the guys who have gotten away are some of the top guys on the board. Like Coy Beasley being a four-star safety, or Ryan Nichols being a four-star cornerback, or Elias Rudolph as a four-star defensive end, and Dominic Kirks as a four-star defensive end. They've missed on some of the higher-rated guys, the guys who would really make this class even more aesthetically pleasing. I think it's got some really quality football players in it right now, but it'd be more aesthetically pleasing if you had a lot of those bright, shiny stars bumping up the recruiting rankings and just generally looking nice. And so they've missed on some of those guys. And it's been disappointing. And I understand why Pitt fans have been disappointed. I also think that there's a certain element of treading in somewhat new territory. Look, I think this has been one of the more impressive Junes that we've seen from Pitt. One of the more impressive visit months that we've seen from Pitt under Pat Narduzzi. Maybe the most impressive visit month under Pat Narduzzi. I'd have to go back and compare June to June to June over the last 8 or 9 years. But this one is right up there. They've had some really good recruits on campus. And the reality is, when you have that caliber of prospect on campus with the caliber of offer sheets that some of these guys have, you're not going to get all of them. And I know Pitt fans will say, well, I'd like to get more than they've gotten. Well, yeah, you've always liked to get more than they've gotten. But the reality is they've gotten some really good prospects, and they've gotten some really good commitments. Cameron Lindsey's a really good commitment. Caleb Holmes is a really good commitment. You can kind of run down the list of some really good targets. There's some guys that are still on the board that they have a good chance of landing to keep adding to those stars in the class. But it comes back to that basic idea, though, that when you recruit at this level, you're going to miss on some guys. And it's going to sting more. When you miss on the 3-star guy or the 2-star guy, it doesn't sting quite as much as it does when you miss on the 4-star guy. You want to get all those 4-star guys. Well, they did a good enough job getting them here. They didn't land all of them. They've still got a chance to land a few more. But I think it just kind of comes with the territory. That if you're going to recruit at this level, if you're going to be involved with Hakeem Williams, you might not get him. And that might sting because you had this, seemingly good chance with a 5-star prospect. And I'm talking about last year here. And so it stings when you miss on him, but it stings when you miss on Ryan Nichols, or you miss on Elias Rudolph or Dominic Kirks or any of these 4-star guys this year. But I think it's still a sign of your recruiting that you're in the position that you are with these guys to begin with. And I know you got to close, and I don't care. Talk to me when they actually sign. I get it. But I think you have to understand that it's still impressive recruiting to get to this point. And the reality is when they came into the month, they weren't going to get all the 4 stars anyway. The reality is when they came into the month, they were going to miss on a bunch of these guys. I think you and I could have predicted that, right? They've still done a good job, I think, with recruiting. And that brings me into point number 4, that I still believe they'll end up with 6 4-star prospects in this class. What do the kids do? 6. Can you count 6 like that? I don't think you can. Let's just go with 3s. 6 4-star prospects in the class. They've got 3 already. In Jasir Whittington, Day Farmer, and Cameron Lindsay. Like I say, I think Caleb Holmes should be a 4-star prospect. I know there are some out there who don't want to hear me predict that guys will become 4-star prospects, but I think he should become one. If they can hold on to the 3 they've got and Holmes gets a bump, that's 4. We still like their chances with Sincere Edwards. He could potentially be 5. And then you're looking at, pulling one of these other guys who's still on the board, possibly, landing somebody late in the process, which they've done quite a bit. They've gotten a 4-star prospect late in the process, something like 5 out of 8 years or 6 out of 8 years. So it's not exactly unheard of to do that. I think there are a few different paths that can get them to 6 4-star prospects in the class. And I think that I still believe that's where they're going to end up. I still believe that they're going to end up with 6 in the class, which would look pretty good. That'd be the most Narduzzi has ever signed. So you got that to look forward to if my prediction holds. And then my 5th thought on the class is the needs and the wants. What do they still need in this class? What do they still want in this class? Need, I call it a need. Pitt might not call it a need, but I call it a need. At quarterback, I think they should try and get a good quarterback, somebody they're convinced about, whether it's Trevor Jackson and Julian Duggar or someone else that emerges that convinces the staff. I think they should try to get a quarterback. They seem to have wanted a second running back and a second tight end. I would probably put a second tight end in the need column because of what their depth situation is, but it seems so improbable to me that they could ever accomplish that. I know they signed 3 tight ends one year and maybe 2 another year, but it seems so improbable to me that they could pull that off now with 2 quality prospects that I can't put a second tight end in the need. That feels like a luxury just because they've set the bar so low for tight end recruiting. Wide receiver, though. I think a 3rd wide receiver to go with Day Farmer and Cam Montero. I think that's a need. I think they need to keep reloading there. They signed 4 receivers last year. I think they need at least 3 in this year's class, if not 4. So I would put that in the need column. And defensively, obviously offensive line, I think they're good with 5. Defensively, I don't know where I would really circle a need at this point. They've got 3 linebackers. I think that's where they want to be. They've got 4 defensive linemen. I think they want more on top of that, but I don't know if they necessarily need it. I think it would be good to get another defensive end in this class. Maybe that would be a need. Actually, I could be convinced to say that it's a need to get another defensive end in this class. DBs, they've got the 4 committed. Even if they only end up with 3 of those, I think that's pretty solid. I would probably put a 4th DB or an extra DB on top of what they've already got. I would put as probably a want more than a need. So I feel like on defense, I don't think they really have much in the way of needs aside from maybe an extra defensive end. Everything else that they might want to add on defense, I think, is a want. Offensively, I think a quarterback is a need, and I think a wide receiver is a need. I think the staff views wide receiver as a need position, that they need another wide receiver in this class, if not 2. And then I think they'd want another running back. I think they'd want another tight end. I think they might be able to get another running back. I'm not going to get too greedy with tight ends because you know how that tends to go. And then the other thing you have to account for, and the staff has to account for, is they're deciding whether to take commitments from this guy or that guy. They've got to build in some insurance, and we talked about this with the offensive linemen. They have to build in some insurance to hedge against decommitments. And that's not to say there's anybody specifically I'm looking at, this guy or that guy, but you got to be prepared for it. And I think they have to have an idea of where they stand if certain guys are on thin ice with them. That either they think they might lose them or they might drop the kid. You got to be aware of that, and you got to be prepared for it. You've got to be ready to fill that spot, even if you fill it before the decommitment even happens. So you might end up with 6 offensive line commits, expecting to end up at 5. You might end up with 5 defensive backs, expecting to end up at 4. You need to have a real feel for the situation and allow that to make at least some of the decisions when it comes to choosing what commitments or which commitments to take. So that'll be one of the other interesting storylines to watch as time goes on. It's certainly it's going to be it's part of the story every year. It's part of the recruiting cycle every year. It's decommit season every year, and we got to keep an eye out for it. So we will. All right, that's it for me. Go enjoy your picnics. Go enjoy the fireworks. Be safe with all those things, but have a happy and safe 4th of July and an Independence Day. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow. It's another position preview day. We're going week by week through every position. This week it's receiver week, which we've got a ton of content about the wide receivers on Panther-Lair.com right now. A lot of stuff for you to read, so go check that out. And we'll have a preview of the receivers on tomorrow's Morning Pitt, so make sure you tune in for that. And then, of course, we have the live Panther-Lair show tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett talking about all things Pitt sports. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Like I say, I hope you have a happy and safe 4th of July. I'm running out of ways to say words, so I'm just going to call it quits right here. Thanks for tuning in. Like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll check you on Panther-Lair.com, and we'll talk to you tomorrow morning on the Morning Pit right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.